Hello, welcome to the January 14th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. We'll get started here in just a moment. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything is coming through fine. Bear with me just a second. Hello, welcome to the January 14th. All right, so it sounds like on my monitoring computer, everything is coming through fine. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the Club Cubase live stream today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. I work as a product specialist for Steinberg products for Yamaha Corporation of America. And if you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance by sending an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Or you could simply ask your question live in the chat field. When asking questions, it's often helpful if you could indicate which operating system you're running, which version of Cubase, whether it's Artist, Elements, or Pro, AI, LE, and which version number. So if it's 10, 10.5, or 11, etc. So realize that my ability to answer questions in real-time nature that's synced with the chat will quickly go away. So I will try to answer all the questions in chronological order as completely and succinctly as possible. So if we could try to refrain from asking the same question repeatedly, if you don't get an immediate response, that would be appreciated. Otherwise, it just kind of takes a lot more time for me to kind of wade through questions. So that will allow us to get through more questions. We'll try to go for about 4 hours today. We should have the different topics that have been discussed in the live stream posted and pinned to the top of the comments field later tonight. So you could use that to jump to specific questions. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and we have Jan, who is helpful in compiling that and creating that resource for us. So that will go through over 15,000 topics that we've discussed in the live stream since kind of COVID started. So we kind of ramped it up. So use that. So I want to give a special thanks to Jan for his efforts with that. It's a wonderful resource to the Steinberg community. I want to give special thanks also to two people that serve as moderators on the forum. We usually have a really well-behaved, civilized group, but I want to give a special thanks out to Agent K and Jazz Dude for moderation and kind of keeping an eye on things in the chat in more real-time nature than I'm able to as I'm answering the questions. One other resource I want to mention is the Cubase Nation Discord, and Jazz Dude does a lot of work in compiling, lots of different useful tutorials. So that's a wonderful resource. So again, another special thanks to Jazz Dude for that. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we just see comment just says, Greg, I hope Cubase inherits some of the features in Dorico 4 as well as the incredibly clean and streamlined UI. So there's always new things coming, but realize that there are two different programs. But I think we always will see streamlined UI stuff coming in every version of Cubase. All right, so we have Uno Memento checking in from Finland. All right, so we have a question. Hi, how can I have the sound from a MIDI part continued from where it stopped? So I'm not sure if it's, let's take a quick look at this, make sure I'm understanding the question okay. So let's say if I just will do a new project here. I will come over here. So let's add a quick instrument track. All right, so say, and I'll just go ahead and record quickly, a quick note here. Okay, so let's say if I want that to play, so let's say I play the note, and then when I stop, that will kind of send a note off message with the transport, and I think that's to be expected. But let's say if we come over here to MIDI and maybe if we choose to not chase events on note message, that if you wanted that to continue playing and sounding after it stopped, let's see if that does it. I'm not sure what the use case of that is, but let's say if I come here. So usually stopping will, once I stop the transport, that will kind of send note off messages, which is kind of to be expected. But with that preference disabled, so now when I click on and play back again, with that preference disabled, the note won't sound. But if I wanted to come over here, now that note, once we have the chase events, that as we would kind of play, we'll come here, that it would automatically chase the notes. But I don't know of any sequencer that really, when you stop the note, that when you stop the transport, if I'm understanding correctly, if you wanted the note to continue on, and if there is a particular use case or why you would want that. So trying to see if there's any other preferences, but I think that's kind of how it's going to behave. But if you could let me know if there's a specific reason why you want it to do that behavior, or if I'm misunderstanding your behavior. Okay, so we have a question from Benny. So we have a question. The strange thing is that when I start Cubase, the program says that reverence cannot be loaded, but it is in Cubase when everything is running, but no presets help. So generally, it may be that you have the reverence presets. The reverence is a reverb that's based on convolution. So it's almost like a reverb sample. It's like a sample-based reverb. So if we think of how we would trigger a sample, and that's what that is going to do. So try going to your media bay, and then let's say if we go to VST sound, I think if we come over here, you may see let's see if it shows up in media bay as a separate. Okay, so it's like under factory content and see. So often when I see a message that's kind of like that, I may think that it is going to, that the content isn't installed. So let's say if we come over here, maybe to your reverence, you could try to rescan the disk, but generally I think what it's indicating is that particular, those samples that are the basis for the reverb aren't there. The worst case scenario is you could probably just reinstall, and that should place those particular convolution impulses into the correct location, and then you shouldn't have that message. All right, wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, and we have Jazz Dude on, John Costigan from Kenosha. And if you're watching the live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself. All right, so we have David M. checking in. All right, and we have Sable Winters on the live stream. Thanks for joining us, being a part of the community. All right, and we have Trond from Norway. All right, we have Stefan from Sweden. All right, we have Jan from CubaseIndex.com. Right, we have Nigeria and Dusseldorf. You see sound is fine. Okay. We have Mitch checking in from Michelle. All right. And we have Avery checking in from Israel. In Burbank, California. We have Soren in Sweden. Sable from San Francisco. Just see a question. When will Cubase 12 be out? So, we just announced that it's going to be coming soon. So they haven't, an official date hasn't been announced. So, but we'll just have to be patient. As soon as it's out, we'll be happy to show you all of the new features. All right. We have Taylor Sapp from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. All right, so we just see if the question from Taylor, if the instrument pitch bend is set for 3 and the MIDI pitch bend grid is set for 12, does it divide 3 semitones up into 12 equal portions? I think, one of the great things that you could do with this, I think it may divide it proportionally. But if we just go, so let's say on this, we look at our instrument, we'll probably see our pitch bend range here on Retrolog up 3 semitones. So if I just play a note, so we can go minor third. But if we wanted to just select the pitch bend here, what I would always do now that you have the capability of doing this is to just set the pitch bend range up and down to match whatever is going to be for the particular instrument on that track. So now when I wanted to show the pitch bend grids, we could come right over here and we'll show our semitones grid. So once that's checked, now we could just draw in pitch bend and have that automatically apply to the grid and snap. So, if you have the option of within 1 mouse click to match the pitch bend grid in the editor to the instrument, I would do that instead of trying to make it map artificially. All right, so we have a question. So does the new Cubase Pro 12 license allow you to use the previous versions of Cubase Pro 11, 10.9, etc., like the current USB dongle does? So the new licensing system, as we saw introduced in Dorco 4 this week, so that will allow you can keep your Cubase Pro 11 on your USB-E licenser. And if you wanted to run earlier versions, you would have to utilize the USB-E licenser for that. Okay, so just see from Taylor, when I turn on the loopback on the DSP mixer for the UR44, I get a message saying, cannot use MIDI port. It is being used by another app. Sound does not transfer to video recording. What am I missing? So generally, the MIDI shouldn't really be part of the loopback functionality. And make sure that when you're if you're utilizing the loopback and if you wanted to do it with audio, I think that you're going to actually have to connect the microphone into inputs 1 or 2, as opposed to inputs 3 and 4. So give that a try, Taylor. Okay, so I just see a question. How much does Cubase cost in euros, please? There's kind of, in the US, I'm not sure what the euro price is because I only work for the US distributor, but I believe in the US it's $99 for Cubase Elements. Artist is $349 maybe, and $579 I think for Cubase Pro. But you could check if you just go to the Steinberg online shop or your dealer, you could check prices for euros, and that would probably be more accurate. And it may be parity, but I'm not sure with, I don't follow the European pricing with, different currency changes and stuff like that. So, but, if you go to the Steinberg online shop, if you go to steinberg.net and just click on shop, you should be fine. All right. So we see Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. Thanks for joining. And we have Jason from South Shields, England. All right, and we have FJ Segovia from Madrid. Okay, so we just see, can you quantize MIDI notes to a half note or whole note on one MIDI channel without quantizing the whole project? So quantizing will just work on kind of whatever is selected that you quantize. So let's say if I duplicated this part here, or before I do that, I'll just kind of draw in. All right, so let's say we have kind of like just a bunch of notes randomly placed. So if I wanted to quantize, and now I'll say let's duplicate this track here, so we'll have kind of the same events. So if I choose to quantize, and I'll set my quantize value here to half notes. If I choose to quantize this one, we can see that the values here get quantized. And if we wanted to go to the original track here, that these won't be. So let's say I will just kind of look at both of these events and say, okay, let's go here. Let's select both of these, and I will just switch the name of this. So I will edit both of these events. So now when I come over here and I switch, we can see that because I didn't quantize this one, that the placement is there. Now that I selected the other event and quantized, that we can see that these will be quantized to the half note and the other ones won't. And we could kind of see those spread out. So the quantizing, it won't quantize the whole project, but it is kind of whatever is selected will be the basis for the quantization. So you could quantize the one part to half notes and not affect the other parts of the project. Okay, so we have a question from David M. Hi, Greg. Is Groove Agent is currently in the sale? What are the best reasons for getting it rather than staying with the SE version? Thanks. One is you get more drum kits, but you also get just, what I think is totally worth it is, just the ability to have more capabilities with the percussion agent. So, for the price of, what Groove Agent costs, especially on promotion sale that's going on, I'll just kind of randomly throw a percussion agent onto a track here, and we could just kind of get a sense of how it's kind of an instant produced, more polished sounding production when you just add a little bit of percussion. So... Okay, so let's say I have this and I'm going to open up a new instance of Groove Agent here. So, you get, more pattern capabilities, the ability of running 4 agents simultaneously. But I think if we come over here, we could just say, okay, I just wanted to go to... just this full percussion agent here. So while we kind of just play along, I will just randomly just kind of turn on just a pattern here. So we'll start with it off.
I turn it up, you wouldn't mind.
So now I'm gonna turn Groove Agent on.
That was okay.
And so I just want to bring that down a little bit.
Yes, all along I was so naive. Inboxes ready to leave. Our musical history. I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. 'Cause now you're asking Beatles or Stones.
So even if you bring that like into the chorus, so say we have a nice little foundational groove.
Our musical history laid out on the floor. I've got to choose.
So say now the chorus starts, if you want to just like throw percussion in now.
'Cause now you're asking Beatles or Stones. Something about it
Just make it too loud so you can hear it.
But it's too late to start a fight. Take the records that you like. Please stop asking Beatles or Stones. Just leave it alone.
And you just kind of, let's say you blend that in, you can just augment the groove.
Still love when I played Hey Jude.
Now, also some of the other things. So again, you could run 4 different agents in one. So if you're running multiple groove agents to get, maybe percussion, an acoustic kit, electronic sounds, you could do that all within one particular instance. You also get kind of more performance controls. So if you wanted to do note repeat functionality, you have that capability. When we go to different loops, so let's say if I just wanted to come over here to a particular drum loop. And now that I will just come over here and slice the particular drum loop. So we'll create our slices. So one of the things that you're going to have is the ability to decompose, where we could take, our different, if we wanted to take, the tonal aspect or just the transient aspect, we can decompose our different drum loops. But now that we're in our slice, we could also choose to classify. So let's say, if I'm coming over here, I'll just turn this up a little louder so we could hear it. So if we choose to do classifications, you could actually just kind of group, similar instruments together. So that way you could say, okay, I want my kicks and my snares to be classified. So again, more capabilities, the ability, a lot more kits, a lot more patterns to work with. The performance modes, as well as the ability of decomposing and classifying different components when kind of deconstructing loops. So it's a great version. So I encourage anyone to take advantage of that, as well as the promotion going on for WaveLab. So it's the start of year promotion or something clever like that. All right, great, wonderful to see Cedric on the live stream. All right, and we have Kevin. All right, so we see Cubase Pro 11 Windows, how to import a MIDI file as a single track instead of seeing multiple tracks in a folder. I want to see only one track of my MIDI notes, not the extra information about it. So when we go to import audio files, so a lot of times if it's your MIDI file is, going to have more than, one particular more than one particular channel, it could split that for you, depending on the MIDI file. But let's come over here to preferences. And when we go to our preferences, and we'll go to under MIDI to MIDI file. So on the import options, one of the things that you may want to do is, just choose, okay, I don't want to have the karaoke. I don't want to auto dissolve format 0. There's two different types of MIDI files. There's MIDI file type 1 and MIDI file type 0. So type 0 will have all of the MIDI tracks, and this was primarily for compatibility with hardware sequencers. Think of like the Roland MC500 and of that era, where it's going to take one track, and that track would have all of the MIDI channels. So hardware sequencers like to have 0. So ironically, MIDI files track type 0 all come in one track, and type 1, they're all kind of split to different tracks. So it could depend on the MIDI file itself, how the MIDI file is configured. But if it is saved as a type 0 MIDI file, you could have Cubase automatically not dissolve that. So it will dissolve that by default, so that you don't have to manually do that. So you could try adjusting the auto dissolve format 0, and depending on what functions are in the MIDI file and how the MIDI file is created, you may get additional tracks. Okay. All right. So we have a question. Hi, Greg. I'd like to ask, when you save a project, does Cubase Pro 10 save all VST info? I'm using VST. I'm using the East-West Orchestra, and Cubase won't reload the VST, but all others do. Cheers. So generally, every VST, should be recalled to the same state unless there's some reason that, like that plugin has to manually load samples. So I haven't heard that with like East-West instruments. But I think by default, in all the projects I've done, all of my VST instruments will automatically recall. So maybe there's something with the East-West instruments specifically. Maybe someone that I don't have any East-West licenses. But you could, maybe you could check. Someone else could chime in on that. All right, just see a comment from Sean about the MIDI stopping. So what they're asking is for the tails to continue on the MIDI notes and not chasing events. Yeah, so I think as soon as, the transport is stopped in Cubase, it's going to send a MIDI notes off message. So I haven't, in many years, I haven't had anyone ask for the MIDI notes to continue past the transport stopping. So, but if there's a specific use case, I could love to hear it so I could understand better. Maybe we come up with some other solution. Okay, we have a question. In mastering on the LUFS meter, the difference between the RMS and the peak level, is there any way of mixing to shorten the difference? Does it matter? So let's say if we're looking at our meter and we're going to look at our loudness meter. So is there any way to shorten the difference, let's say, between RMS and the peak level? So, when we're kind of working on this, and I'll just adjust my control room volume down here.
I should have told you were out of tune. Whatever you did, that was okay.
Just bring this down. So, when we do this, so, with the LUFS, we're going to have, we could look at, our traditional meters here, where we can see our RMS and kind of like our peak RMS as we're working with this. So is there a way in mixing to shorten the difference? So it could really depend on every single project. could be different. And, to the question, does it matter? I think as long as you have, the levels kind of in the ballpark of where you want that, no one is going to not buy a song because, the difference between, the peak level and RMS is, too broad. So I don't think it's the most concerning thing. All right, so we see Mandy Lane on the live stream. Okay, so we just see from Cedric, question, Greg, is there a shorter way to create drum maps for the montage drum kits? It's time consuming to key the list in. Thank you. So there may be some kind of floating around. I could check with some of my Yamaha colleagues in the US to see if they bothered to create drum maps. If you have drum maps, but sometimes I did old ones, the ones that you see for the Alesis D4, I did all those. And it's one of those things that I would, so as you're kind of working with it, you could type the name in and then arrow key down and, save the different ones. And if there's a table of all the drum maps, it's not too hard to create. But if you have a table, I'd be happy to make some to share with people. So if you wanted to share a table of all the different drum kits, I'd be happy to get those and see if we get them included. My chat field jumped on me, so. Okay. All right, so we have Farzad checking in from Iran. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have a question. Can you change the MIDI functions on Cubase 10? For example, change the sustain pedal, CC64, to another MIDI command. So there's there's a couple of different ways of doing this. If you wanted to do particular functions in the program, you could go to your studio menu to studio setup and go to generic remote. And here you could have any MIDI message. So you could click on learn and hit that particular MIDI message and say, okay, at this point we wanted to adjust, when I click on my sustain pedal, I wanted to start or stop or punch in or record. So we could define different functions for that MIDI. If you wanted the sustain pedal to do another pedal, to, say I want this to turn on, another MIDI CC message, we could do that through the MIDI input transformer. So if we go to the track itself, and then what we could do is we could activate the module and we could say, okay, we want it to take type is equal to controller. And then we could say value 1 of that controller will be 64. And we want it to take value 1. And let's say if I wanted this to control, to turn on controller 53, I would say we want to subtract 11. So now every time I would hit a CC64 message on this track, it could automatically subtract 11 values from 64 so that it would turn that sustain pedal into controller 53. So we could do different functions like that with the input transformer. So let me know if that's what you want it to do. All right, so we have Jesper checking in from Denmark. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see question, Pad Shop VST3 is making Cubase 8.5 crash at startup when plugins are gone through or going through. Apart from removing Pad Shop from disk, is there something that could be done to exclude it? So I'm not sure if you go into one is you could probably just make sure that you have the latest version of Pad Shop, but I can't remember if this was introduced in 8.5 yet. But maybe if you go to the VST plugin manager and if you go to the VST instruments, that you could choose to not have it active within your current. This might have come in 9 or 9.5. I don't exactly remember, but try to see if you had the VST plugin manager. You might be able to just kind of manually remove that. And you could also, try holding down Alt Control Shift or Command Option Shift if you're on Mac or PC. And at that point, you could start and hold down Alt Control Shift or Command Option Shift and start it in safe mode and see. And that may allow you to kind of temporarily disable the preferences and see if you could get into the program, and that would probably work. All right, so we just see a question. Track versions. Is it possible to make a composite across different track versions? So let me just take a look. So say if we jump to this project here. Okay, so I'm not sure, let's say if we wanted to take our, let's say our lanes here. So let's say if I will come over, let me just go to my track control settings and activate lane view. I'll just move it up so it's a little more visible. Okay, so now when I go to my lanes, all right, so let's say I wanted to, maybe have different track versions or different comps on different track versions. Maybe that's what the question's asking. What I could do is I could start off and just say duplicate version. So let's say I just want to call this. Okay, so I will come over here and, okay, so we'll call this original. All right, so if I will come over here and let's do like our different comps here. So let's say that's my comp here. And if I go to, let's say my alternate comp, I could now just have different comps on different track versions that are independent of each other. So let me know if that's what you mean in your question, if that's what you intend. All right, so we have Frank checking in from the Netherlands. All right, so we just see, hi Greg, is it possible to see the chords in very audio view? I forgot how to fix the chord track in track view so that if I scroll down, I can see the chord track. Thank you. So the Very Audio Editor currently doesn't have, when you're in the Very Audio Editor, you're not going to be able to see kind of all of the, so let's say if I just come here and we go to our Very Audio Editor. So within the Very Audio Editor, we're not going to be able to see the chords. So when we just come right over here, so the chords aren't visible. So within the MIDI editors themselves, that we can see the chords and global tracks on the top of it. So, and if we wanted to have the chord track where it sticks kind of, to the top, all we had to do is use the divide track list function. So let's say if I just wanted to come here, the world's worst chord. So all I had to progression. So if I just click right here, we could just say divide track list, and we could activate that so that now when I'm doing, I could scroll up and down without and leave different tracks kind of fixed at the top as I navigate. So come over here, just click on the divide track list. It's this little icon. It's very subtle right under this triangle pointing down. And then we could come over here. You could scroll within this. And if you wanted a particular track to be in the top, you could right click on that track and you could choose to toggle tracks. So let's say if I want to take this track, you could right click and toggle track list, and that will move it to the top or move it to the bottom. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer checking in, and we see Scape 21 from San Diego checking in. Thanks for joining us. All right, and I think it's Onoa saying hello. All right, and we have Chris Hallam from Columbia, South Carolina. Okay, so a question. What's the best way to consolidate a project to zip and send to someone, assuming the possibility that the audio files may be in more than one directory? So that's where we can go to the file menu and just choose backup project. And if we choose backup project, this would automatically, we choose a new folder. And once we have this new folder, all of the projects, all of the audio files in that particular project will be stored into that new folder. So once you do that, we could choose to minimize the audio files. We could make, direct offline processing permanent if needed. You could remove unused files. You could choose to not include the video or the mixdown folder. But once you do that, within that new folder, and then either on Mac OS or Windows, just compress that to a single file, and then you could share that. So it's just come here to the backup project, and that will move all the different files, place it into a common folder. So if your audio files are scattered, and that way you could migrate it and archive it and share it with people easily. All right, so we have a question. Can you please show in-depth to audio quantize? Can't get it to work with Cubase 11. Last update, no matter what I do. All right, so let's just do a file here. So we'll do a new project. Okay, so let's say we'll take this drum loop here. Okay, and I'll just set this not into musical mode. All right, so let's say we want to, so we have our drum loop here, and let's say if we wanted to quantize this drum loop to a different feel. So we could double click, and the first thing we want to do probably is just to kind of set, when audio is recorded into Cubase, it's going to place it where it'll have kind of an automatic hit point detection unless you've specifically told it through a preference to disable that. But if we wanted to, let's say, come over here, but if we don't do that, our hit points will be just set to the musical grid. So we could see that right now we don't have hit points and stuff will kind of be set to the grid. But if I wanted to just come over here, we could say, okay, I wanted to quantize this to quarter notes, and we would enable audio warp. So I could just say quantize, and that will kind of snap. But let's say we'll just undo that, but let's come over here to our hit points. So we can double click, we go to our audio hit points, and I just wanted to kind of find the rhythmically significant points of the audio file. So we could do it by intensity as well. So let's say, okay, I just want it to come here, and we'll get some of those small hi-hats going as well. So we could kind of adjust kind of like that. And now we could just say, okay, let's come over here and create warp markers. So if, once we've done that, so we can assign these warp markers, like say, okay, let's just make this more of a 16th note triplet quantize. And now we can have more of a groove, and let's undo that and say, okay, let's make it more a straight 16th note feel. So as you do that, we could just move these things. And one of the things that you could also do is once we have those warp markers, if we go to audio warp, you could just go to each of those hit points has been transformed into a warp marker. So as we come, we could just say, let's go to free warp, and now I could just physically just move individual markers as I see fit. So, once you come over there, so if you don't have hit points, it's going to kind of just have the grid. And then if you have the hit points, turn those into warp markers. And then you could just come over here and easily kind of quantize the audio and move it around. So once you get to your audio warp, then you can see that the different transients will snap accordingly. So I just see comment, I just wish machine would work without routing. I guess that's an NI fault. So yeah, I believe so. I don't have machine. All right, we see Jeff Zabelski. All right, so just see from Dallas LaRue again, maybe I misunderstood, but it says in mastering the difference between the peak and the RMS level, so let's say if we look at this, we could think of the peak level, if we're doing if we go to, let's say, our meter tab here, our peak is going to be kind of the very loudest points, and we could think of the RMS as more of the overall average loudness of it. So when people can manipulate loudness, they may try to boost the RMS to make something be perceived as louder. And we often, in the old days, especially in the US, before there was some regulation by the FCC, and it's happened in other countries, where there was no particular standard for broadcast, so commercials could be manipulated to sound much louder than the program material, so it would capture more interest and energy from the listener. So just applying different amounts of compression would often could get your overall RMS levels up to make it sound louder. So, but realize that if you're doing that, you may manipulate your mix so that it is going to may get compressed later in the listening experience for the customer. So, I don't worry about it so much if your levels are good, but sometimes if something sounds like a little more dense and full, it could have an RMS, and it's not like a button you could turn on in your mix. It just could take a lot of experience in mixing and mastering to kind of get that. All right, so we see Henry Brown checking in from Vancouver. Thanks for joining us. And we have Matt Elliston from London. All right, so we have a question. Will there be a Cubase 11.5, or will they skip it this time and go straight to 12? So I'm not sure if we'll see 0.5 versions in the future. So they're going straight to version 12. So it'll be a pretty significant update. All right, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas is online. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Jazz Dude was kind enough to post a euro rate. So it's 581.99 euros for Cubase Pro. Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button, so that allows us to continue to do these live streams. Okay, so you just see kind of a further clarification on the quantizing. So it says, thanks for trying to answer my question, but I was talking about quantizing the part as the part is played. So, if you're doing there's an auto quantize, and that's going to be global. So, as you're playing in, that would automatically quantize on a particular track. So if you're doing that across multiple tracks, you could have that automatically quantized on input. So some people doing drum programming may just do auto quantize so that they could, just put a bunch of notes in and have it all turned out as eighth notes when they play it 3 times faster, 4 times faster, just kind of play faster notes that will quantize. So that will be one static value for the auto quantize functions. So not really set independent values for different MIDI tracks. Sorry for my misunderstanding. All right, so just see a comment. I'm so eager for Cubase 12. Come on, Steinberg, don't drag this out. So, just just know that, there's a lot of people, staying up late working on functionality and features. So, all right, so we see Alexander from Moscow on the live stream. So we see just comment from Jeff Sabelski. Wavelab Pro 11 looks like a significant update to Wavelab 10 Pro. So yeah, and especially if you're doing a lot of immersive mixing. So now it used to be that Wavelab previous versions would only handle stereo files, but now you could do 5.1 and 22 channel files and be able to edit it. It's really helpful for a lot of people. Okay, so we have a question. Is it okay to put drums or vocals or something to a group? And I just see Laos to VCA to control volume via VCA and effects via group. As I can understand, a groups sum the sound. So yeah, you could do that as well. So especially if you have like a lot of complex automation. So let me just open up a particular project here where we have some drum automation going on. All right, so let's say if we have we're going to have a project that we may want to use a combination of VCAs and groups. So I will come over here. Let's say we'll just listen to this. So all right, so let's say if I wanted to take like all of my drums here. Okay, so let's say I have these channels selected, and what I could do now is we could add a group track to these selected channels. And I'm just going to create that outside the folder. So now this is my group. So this is going to sum all of my different sources. But one of the things that gets to be tricky is now we have automation going on. So as we look at the automation, I could take the same selected channels. I'm going to create a VCA. So let's say if I come here, I'm going to add a VCA fader to the selected channels. Okay, so now I could go to my... All right, now where the difference gets to be is, let's say if I go to my snare track, let's see if I have a verb in here. All right, so I'm going to add too much reverb on my snare. All right, so let's say I just put a big reverb on here. Okay, so now when I adjust my channels here, notice that as I bring it down, it doesn't take into effect like the reverb send. And if I have automation that's kind of going in contrary motion, let's say as like one track is going up, the other track is going down. As I have my VCA fader, since it's not summing, we could just kind of come right over here. Let's say we'll just go ahead and solo our snare here. So now as I bring this down, it doesn't affect the gain structure between the two. And one of the reasons that we would use kind of a VCA is if I had a lot of automation, let's say existing automation going on, I could automate the VCA here. And while the VCA is going down and tracks are going up, it'll just kind of basically attenuate So as I move this up, my existing automation is still there. And now when I go to look at a particular track, I could see that, we could have, when we go to our volume automation, that I can see this line is the fader, and this is kind of the result of the VCA. So if I select the VCA now, we could come right over here and just say combine the automation of the VCA. So now we could actually kind of change and morph the automation to match the VCA fader is what's been done with it. So that's some of the reasons why people would use VCAs and groups, but you could use them both simultaneously. All right, so I see that Michael Teams has granted me 1 gallon of pecan ice cream for my family and myself. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to having it after the live stream when my throat will hurt for talking for 4 hours. All right, so you just see a question. Hi, I bought several full versions of Steinberg products, after which I have the new full version along with the SE version. Can I get rid of the SE version at that point? I see SE sounds doubled. So generally, it's going to be the same sounds. And both programs are, like if you have a full version of Groove Agent and a full version and Groove Agent SE, for instance, that comes bundled with Cubase, they're both accessing the same content. So while it may look like there's two, it's not installing double the content. It's just accessing the same content. So you could get rid of it, but if you're collaborating with someone else and they sent something that was in Groove Agent SE because they didn't have the full Groove Agent version, then you'd have to kind of manually go through and add it. So if you're doing it just to kind of get rid of different samples, realize that for the most point that they're going to be utilizing the same samples in the actual program, like the player, is pretty small. So it's probably not necessary to get rid of it, but you could if you wanted to. So because the bigger versions will have all the same functionality, but with today's computers, I think it's pretty negligible in size, and you might as well keep it for compatibility with other people if you do that, or with older projects. All right, so we see question, can you give us a hint of a new feature of Cubase 12 outside of the licensors? The only other feature that's been announced is going to be Apple M1 chip native compatibility. So, but that's it, and I can't really comment on unreleased software, so I'm under different non-disclosure agreements if I was involved with testing, so... So I just see, hi, do you know if Cubase 12 will still support Mojave, please? So I don't think that there's going to be any changes with that, but I'm not absolutely positive. I don't have Mojave anymore on my Mac. But I could see if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to see if I could find out an answer for you. I know that the latest version of Dorco is still working on Mojave, so I think with the licensing system that it shouldn't be a problem, but I haven't personally experienced it on that operating system. Okay, so we have a question from Michael Teams. It says, he's so generous with ice cream for everyone. we'll go through this. So can you walk through, the question is, can you walk through the very audio in a vocal line, please? Okay, so let me just... Okay, so if we wanted to do very audio editing, we could do this in the sample editor. And a lot of times when I'm doing very audio, I may take it to full screen just so I have more to work with. And probably my eyesight as I get older is bad. It was bad before. So once we click on edit very audio, it's going to automatically do an analysis and then be able to convert these, what was the vocal file, into segments. And this is very similar to treating these segments we could think of as like MIDI notes. So there's going to be different ways of colorizing. So if you wanted to colorize if we have a chord track in the project, so let's say if I wanted to create a chord track from this piano part, I could come right over here. Let's go to the chord track and we'll say create chord symbols. All right, so now that we've created a chord track, we could come over here to our very audio editor again, and we'll have kind of different coloring options. So I could actually, look at based on the chord track where you see red notes are out of key, green are within the chord, and blue are within the scale. Now there's two different modes of smart controls. I would always switch from default to showing all smart controls. So let's go ahead and take a look as we zoom in. Now, if I wanted to come over here, and one of the things that we want to do is change the pitch snap mode from absolute to absolute. So once we do this, if I wanted to now just kind of nudge a particular note, it would go and kind of nudge that note to be perfectly in tune. So if we looked at this is probably a little flat. Now I could just nudge that to being in tune. As we look at our different, if I wanted to select different functions here, so let's say, if I wanted to come over here, so a lot of the different functions that we're going to have is one, if you go to the top, this could straighten the pitch curve. And this would be basically editing the vibrato. If a note is slightly, if it's out of tune, and if I wanted to just grab the bottom of it, we could have that automatically kind of snap to the nearest tonal center. So that's what the bottom does. So in previous versions, we would, prior to version 10, we would always have to kind of go over here and quantize the pitch and straighten the curve through these little sliders. But now we could just access these right here. So if we wanted to come over here, let's say when we look at notes, sometimes we may realize that the notes will drift like flat or sharp. So if we wanted to, we could grab the ends of notes and be able to kind of, bring up the pitch. But we can see that that'll do it from the center, but it's actually from like this little diamond that we see here. So if I move this diamond over, at that point, I could just nudge up the pitch where the pitch may have drifted flat when the singer's lost diaphragm support, and we could just nudge at that direct point. Sometimes when we're doing different words, we may run into scenarios where we may, like, transitions between notes can be problematic. So if I wanted to have a natural transition, we see these little triangles in the upper right hand corner. We could now come over here and I could straighten the pitch of just kind of the middle part, but not have the, so as I do a straightened pitch here to minimize vibrato, at that point we could just see that it's not going to do it, in this beginning and ending area. So it's only going to do the edits right there. If we wanted to just grab the edges, I could say I want that note to start here, or I want a note to last a little longer. I could just select and just kind of extend the note out, like just kind of warping the particular note. So like those tools. Now, while you're doing this, if you wanted to adjust deformance, so let's say if I had to move this up like a perfect fifth or a perfect fourth, I could now come over here and adjust deformance on individual segments as well. If I wanted to create a new segment, I just go to the bottom and then it will automatically turn into a scissors tool. If I go to where two segments are joining each other and I wanted to join those and create one segment, let's say the vibrato is really wide, I can now just come over here and that will turn into a glue tool for your benefit. So we can kind of also just come over here, resize, kind of change the notes. We also see, our formants, but while you're here, sometimes you may just want it to adjust the volume. Maybe one little segment's a little too loud or a little too soft, and we could increase or decrease the volume here and add 12 dB of gain just on the segments while you're doing the very audio editing. Something else that's helpful is, let's say, as we're working with this, is we could also have a MIDI reference part. So like say, I wanted to see the piano part to see what notes were in the piano part, and I could have that as a reference directly here. So I could see the piano part, underneath. So I could see what pitches are going to be from a piano part underneath the actual audio, so I can make sure that everything works that way. So those are some of the things that you could do with Very Audio to help do vocal correction. All right, going through. All right, and we see Roland Klein checking in from Kalmar, Sweden. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we have a question from Soren. It says, in Wavelab Pro 11, when pressing process loudness and go to Spotify level, what is exactly done then? Is it a limiter action that applies to minus 14 LUFS? Same question for normalize and Cubase. So what it's going to be doing is just normalizing, and I believe it's to minus 14 LUFS for that. And realize that setting may change over time, but I believe that's the latest kind of target loudness unit that Spotify is using. So just a question. I'm guessing 12 will not be a lot of new stuff. The dongle programming would be a heck of a task. So you could kind of get a sense of like how many features were in Dorco 4, even though they kind of utilized a new licensing system starting 2 days ago. So, while it is a big task, there's still a lot of great, I think we'll see lots of great, wonderful features as well. Okay, so you see talking drum kits. Is there anyone pre-made for the Korg Kronos? So I don't know if there's not drum kits, but drum maps. So I don't know, but there could be some floating online. Often manufacturers will make drum maps as well for their particular instruments, but they're pretty easy to create from user created. Okay, so we have Mav checking in from South Africa, and we have Kenneth checking in from Las Vegas, and Michael Marshall from Somerset, UK. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so we just see why Cubase doesn't send me email for demo. So sometimes, when the make sure that when you're creating your My Steinberg account that you have it set up for that, Steinberg can contact you, but also check, because a lot of times the email for trial version codes will get kind of in like a spam folder. So make sure that you check all of your spam folders and check to make sure that it's not going to be in there. But if not, you can email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de and I can pass it on to the team in Hamburg. All right, so we just see from Shauna Love just saying, love your color palette, by the way. So I think it's really just pretty standard colors. I get that. I think I use colors maybe more than other people do, but right now it's just kind of standard colors. So let me see comment from Jazz Dudes, just commenting that the biggest task is to make Cubase full Apple Silicon compatible. That is a big task. I didn't envy our developers this year. So between that and Windows 11 and lots of other changes are kind of out of their control. But they've been working really hard, being very diligent. Okay, reading through comments. See comment from Sean Coffey, sweet trick with the track versions. Love that. Yeah, so I often use track versions as kind of different edits and different, I may render and put that as a track version as well. So all sorts of great stuff that you could do. That way you don't have like 20 different versions of the same file and like, which one should I play? So I like to organize it in track presets. All right, so John Costigan is just letting people know if you learned something, please press the like thumbs up button. So that enables us to continue to do these live streams to help people out. I see Michael Teams just indicating he learned something new every time. All right, so we see Sir Robert from Atlanta. Glad you could join us. All right, we have Steve and Mike checking in from Indiana. Okay, so we have a question from Danny Warren. Is there a way to reset a channel strip back to the default blank state? So let's say if I'm here and I have my channel strip. So let's say sometimes there's like a default or... Yeah, so I think if you just come here, there's a preset. So we'll just load a strip preset, and then we could make this default. So, or you could just save as a default. So let's say if I come here, not load it, I may save that one already as default. So I'll just channel strip. Yeah, it's one I created. So I'll just call this AAA. So it'll show up first on the list. So let's say I will just come right over here. Let's say I have this set up and now I want it to load a channel strip. Boom. So you just save kind of the no settings as default, and that should do the trick for you. All right, so we just see, is there a way to strum and humanize your MIDI? So let's say if I wanted to let's see if we have chords here that would work. So let's say if I just wanted to take like these chords and almost create more kind of strumming. So if you grab what's called like the trim tool, hold down, I think it's the Alt key, and then you could, if I do this correctly, hang on a second. I think it's the Alt key, and then you could just come over here and just take what, you know, what is all kind of just strumming. So let's say if I wanted to come here. So instead of all those notes hitting at once, if I wanted to roll the chord, I could just kind of come right over here. If I hold down the right modifier key, that would help. So hold down like the Alt or Option key, and now. So if you're doing kind of like strumming stuff, that's often kind of what's done to kind of create that. It's just kind of hold down. So, and there is a number of different randomizing functions. So let's say if I just wanted to come over here to length, you know, there's going to be just even when we go to like the MIDI modifiers area, you know, here we could just choose to randomize, you know, position, pitch, velocity, length of notes. So you have two different randomized functions, but, you know, try just selecting, you know, just the trim tool and hold down the Alter option, and then you could easily kind of create guitar strum effects. All right, so I just see comment, the tick random don't work within the panel queue. So I guess this is maybe within the quantize. So let's say I'll just do a new project here. And I'll just create like quick, or I'll just start with a project that has some stuff loaded in. Okay, so let's say I'll just put in some hi-hats. Okay, and okay, so let's say right now we have these set to our safe range. So let's say if I moved all these over, I'm going to select all of these notes and move them, let's say 1, 2, 3. So let's say now I just want to come here and I wanted my safe range within 1 tick. So now if I come over here, all right, so I'm just going to set this to 30-second notes. Okay, so now let's say I wanted to quantize this to quarter notes, and I want to set my safe range So if it's the safe range there, that, you know, so you just have to kind of set the range. So you can see that the 30-second notes that were there before have now been quantized, but the ones within the 34 ticks of the beat were, you know, those were allowed to stay. So that seems to work. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right. So we just see a question: how to automate the sample length in Groove Agent without having to automate the ADSR settings, amp, or filter themselves. So let's just take a look. Let me just. Okay, and this may be more for, let me just do it in this because I think it's going to need a beat agent kit. Okay. Okay, so let me just. So I'm not sure if this is automatable within the, so on our hi-hat. So since it's a not necessarily like a parameter, let me just see if I could. Let's say if I learn CC. So I'm going to just learn a CC here. Yeah, so it doesn't. Let me just check one other quick little area here. So sometimes you could set that. You see it's coming as parameter 129, and or maybe, I know, like we could sometimes adjust this in. Maybe in our automation tab here. All right, so let's say we'll do our hi-hat closed here. So it may have to be kind of assigned in here. Let me just... So that parameter may not be automatable. Let me see if we delete one parameter here and see. Yeah, so the ADSR may not be. I'll go ahead and email the developers and see if that is intentional or if there's a reason for that. Sorry about that. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to take two adjacent notes and quantize one of the notes while keeping the second note relative spacing? So let's just see if so I guess if we had this note here, and let's say if we take it off, so I don't know a way to do that. I know that you could, obviously, quantize both of the notes. And I don't know a way in the logical editor to automatically set the distance between those or to maintain. We could set the distance between, like have it go to the next note and shift it, but it's not going to automatically kind of keep the relative space between the two. So like if we quantize this one and as that moves, we wanted to keep the same distance between the two of them. So I think, let's say if we just switch this to our, we just quantize. So I don't know a way to do that automatically, but I'll kind of think about it. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. And a lot of times, and you just say for kind of like a snare flam. So, a lot of times the instruments themselves can do flams internally. So, or if we have, let's see if there's I know within the MIDI inserts, if we go to the beat designer and we have that activated, that we could flam on the independent notes. But if we're in like a MIDI drum editor, let's see if there's maybe a flam playback mode. But probably if you had the full Groove Agent, you could set up the note repeats for doing flams and be able to kind of automate that. But yeah, so I understand kind of the use case of it. Thanks for the clarification. All right, so I just see a comment. So audio warp doesn't work when the track is in musical mode. So yeah, it does work when the track's in musical mode. So let's say if I wanted to have this track in musical mode, and I come over here. So let's say I go to my hit points and we'll come here and then turn these into our warp markers. So let's get to our audio warp. And so even though it's in musical mode, it's still, we could audio warp. So that's not a factor. So you can audio warp material that's in musical mode or not in musical mode. All right, so we just see how can I change tempo from a shuffle to a straight time within the song. So usually the tempo doesn't indicate if it's a shuffle or a straight time but it's really just going to be like if we have as we're doing, let's say if I have, I'll just grab this event here. So let's say. Okay. So if you're doing it, so the tempo doesn't really determine if it is straight, like a straight feel, or a swing feel. So it's going to be the same tempo, but just kind of different feels within the same tempo. So let's say if I have this and I wanted to take this, let's say, okay, now I want to quantize it. I'll copy this a couple times. So let's say now I wanted this event. Let's say I wanted these to be very straight quantize, like to eighth notes. And I wanted to quantize these two here. And we'll just kind of add our swing percentage up. We'll do kind of an extreme. We'll see if this makes any musical sense. So now I could take this drum part and let's say very straight feeling. And I'll take it off loop. That would help. So it's the same tempo going on. To straight, so it's just really quantizing different amounts, and you can do that for audio or MIDI. So now we'll go into our swing, but the same exact tempo. All right, so we have Eric McCann joining the live stream. Thanks for joining, being part of the live stream today. All right, so we just see a question. It says audio level varies between different virtual instruments. Any tips for how to adjust them to default volume level, or is every sound needed to be adjusted by ear? So I think you would want to kind of adjust everything everything by ear, in different instruments. When you load up different patches, some will be louder and softer even within the same instrument. So you probably will have to do it depending on the sound that's being utilized and the performance. Okay, so we just see, can you review Groove Agent 5 Acoustic Adventure hi-hats, minimum, maximum, open? Okay, so let's just... see if that's a preset. Let me just see if reread. Okay, so I'm not sure if Acoustic Adventure is just a if that's a preset, but let's say if I'm here, depending on, let's say if we go to so let's say, while we're kind of playing this, so let's say if I just come here, I select the hi-hat. And let's go ahead and just say, okay, let's grab. So, we could control kind of the hi-hat. I don't think I have my, but you could control this through, your hi-hat open, like how much you want like a hi-hat to be opened directly there. I'll just take it off that particular pattern here. Sorry. Okay, so let's say now I'll put this into like a loop. Let's see if this makes a difference. And I'll do it to something a little more realistic here. Hang on. So we come here. So, and some of these may be depending on a kit. So let's say if I have my mod wheel. So I think that you could control, depending on the kit, and there's multiple MIDI notes that can transmit different hi-hats that could be controlled, but you could try this, and my mod wheel is not working on my controller, but you could probably also just control it from mod wheel. But let me know if that's a specific kit that you're looking for. All right, so we have a question. In which case smooth tempo option is available after tempo detection? It's always grayed out, so let's take a look. You might have to have something selected, but we'll look. Okay, so let's say I want to do my tempo detection. So I'll go to my project. Okay, so let's say now if I just want to come here. So I think, you may get a, depending upon the material itself. So let's say, I'll see if I could recreate something that's kind of out of bounds here quickly. And see if we get the smooth tempo detection to enable. Okay, so let's say just come over here. Let's say we'll set this to quarter notes. Okay, so now I will just duplicate this a couple times here. And let's add a tempo track. Okay, and now I want to render this. Let me just try something even a little more extreme here. Okay, so let's say this is our tempo changes. Okay, so now I want to come here. Let's turn off our tempo map. We'll go to a new track version. And we'll do a tempo detection. So now that we have extreme, it says apply the smooth tempo. Apply the smooth tempo function if the tempo of the material is assumed to be constant. So at that point, we could just click on the smooth tempo if you wanted to. So it's going to be used for more extreme cases, and you'll see an actual message come up indicating that you may want to consider using the smooth tempo function. Okay, so just see, thank you for the question. Thank you for the follow up. In a MIDI track, you can apply a MIDI insert. There is a quantize insert. I thought that it used to go up to a whole note. I can't get it to go over a quarter note. So I think usually the quantize insert, we'll go ahead and take a look at it. All right, so let's say our quantized notes. So it looks like it's just going to be set to quarter notes for the quantize there. So I don't know if it was, if there are other values in previous versions, but I think that hasn't changed. All right, so we see Millard Brown joining us from Pennsylvania. All right, my chat field jumped on me, so let me see if I can find my spot. All right. All right. So we have a question. So when will we see Cubase 12? Also, do you have any insight or changes other than subscription? So I can't really announce when Cubase 12 will be released until it's released, but it's coming soon. So, there isn't a subscription model. So the licensing is changing so that you do not need a USB-E licenser. It's going to be an identity-based system. And it seems like the initial rollout for Dorco is pretty smooth. But there is no subscription model that's going to be coming with 12. So it's not changing to subscription. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible in some way to listen to different places of a stereo file, listen with a kind of narrow focus along the way from R0, right, 0 to R100. So let's go ahead and show you how you could do that. So if we go to the stereo panner option, so let's come over here and I'll just revert this quickly. I guess we could leave it. So let's say if I wanted to adjust my panning perspective for monitoring, I could go to this stereo track and I'm just going to say let's go to a combined panner. And then once I have a combined panner, I'll make this a little larger so it's easier to see. So if I want it to be so once again, to switch to panner, and you could have this by default. If you come here, we could have it be a balance panner, where we could have it like that. But if we go to a combined panner, we could just kind of hold it down. And then we could have narrower, but just narrow on the right. And you could adjust just the values here. So let's say you wanted to 6 to 100. Or if you wanted to, and even if you wanted to flip the left and right channels, if we just kind of, let's say if we just go up, I could just flip channels like that. So if I just keep moving. So if you listen to like the ride symbol. Yeah, here switch channels. But that's all you have to do. So just use the stereo combined panner. And then it should allow you to do, have kind of, listening to the different places in the stereo file. All right, so you see, hello, Greg. I want to know how to assign output to expression map. Can I get ready for direct use? So if you wanted to assign an expression map, like to a track, I'll just open up a project here, quick Schubert. So, once we go to particular tracks, I can, all you have to do is go to the expression map here. So once we have like an editor tab open, you go to the expression map, and then you could come directly here and load the expression map. Or if you're using a Hallian-based instrument, it could automatically import the key switches. And then once that's done, you can have access to all of your expressions and articulations here. So let me know if that's what you want to figure out. But I'm not sure about assigning the output to the expression map. So again, that's going to be just done directly here. and we say get it ready for direct use. Then once that's loaded, then you should see all the available articulations there. All right, so just see from Jeff Sabelski, he says, Greg, Download Assistant needed a second update, one right after the other, and Soft E licenser is no longer valid. So I'm not sure if this was, if this was with the Dorco SE license, Jeff, but it might be that the Soft E license, often, just reinstalling the E licenser. So if it's not related to the new Steinberg activation manager, you should be fine. But, let me know if it's in conjunction with like updating a Dorco SE license. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, how can you copy exactly the velocity from one MIDI track so you can add it to another MIDI track? Thanks. Okay. So we could actually kind of save these as presets. So let me just jump back to this project here. Okay, so let's say I wanted to take so one way of doing it, let's say I have a velocity like that, a velocity pattern. So what I could do is if I go to the quantize panel, so I will come right over here. Let's go to the quantize panel and I'm just going to drag, let's see if I can just drag the actual notes themselves. But I will take this event and I'm going to drag it into the quantize panel. Okay, so what I want to do is, let's say I have these same events here, and let's say these are all going to be fixed velocity. So what I want to do now is you have a velocity setting within the quantize panel. So we've saved this as a preset. Now I could just come over here and I say velocity to 100% and position to 0%. So now as soon as I come over here, I could select these notes and apply the quantize. And now we have the same quantize, the same velocity pattern applied to. So this way we basically kept a particular preset of the velocity values. So once again, just drag the event in to the quantize panel, and then we could come right over here and set the velocity to 100% and the position to 0%, and then quantize, and then that will just apply the velocity values instead of the positioning. Okay, so we see question. Totally forget why we need to send our drums to two groups when we have parallel compression, for example. Why we need two if we already have dry signal. Please explain. All right, so a lot of plugins didn't start off with kind of like a dry mix, but sometimes people want to also apply EQs differently when doing parallel processing, and to have kind of, different sources that could be automated and blended. So let's say if I wanted to open up this project here, and I wanted to take all of my drums. And let's go ahead and I'm going to add, let's say I'm going to route these to a particular group. So, not all plugins have the capability, a lot of the Steinberg plugins are smart enough to have a wet-dry ratio on them. So let's say if I just wanted to come here to like a vintage compressor. So when we come here, I could just say, okay, let's just make it, say, punchy drums. And then I have kind of a wet dry. So I could do this here, but a lot of times people may want to have, not all, there's many, many compressor plugins that don't have a mix to blend kind of the unprocessed and the processed sounds. So, that's one of the reasons. So you could do this process with any plugins. And sometimes people will like to have the two different groups so that they could automate and maybe EQ the second group independently of the first group. So many times when people are doing parallel processing, especially on vocals, they may just like totally crank the highs so that, that channel will have a different tonality to it as well. And that's why people will use two different groups often. Okay, so we just see a question. Any way to use fader port in native like the CC121? CC121 seems to be discontinuing. So you could use the fader port. I don't think it's as nearly as integrated as what a CC121 does, and there are, parts, some of the parts components are no longer available with different factory fires and shutdowns. So some of the components are no longer available for the CC121, but you could definitely use any controller with Cubase very easily. All right, so we see Gareth has made the live stream. Thanks for joining us. All right, so I just see a question. Can you edit the transition between notes if you want to create a legato where the singer, example, loses breath? So let's go ahead and take a look. Activate this project. So yeah, you can definitely come up with fixes for situations like that. So let's see if we could find
At the ground, not a sound.
So let's say like this this note here.
At the ground, not a sound.
So if I wanted to just kind of elongate that, and let's say we put this into
Ground, not a sound.
So even if you wanted that note to start a little earlier, and let's say, okay, I just wanted to bring that up, and let's just extend this back, so we could do. So say, okay, we drifted flat here, and I just wanted to bring that note over because we had lost diaphragm support. I wanted that to last just a little bit longer. But still make it sound natural. So you could do phrasing like that very easily within Very Audio. So we see Gareth wants me to quantize his guitar part. So that's why I had him play it specifically out of time for demonstration purposes. So, and he was a champion. Overcame all his musical sensibilities. All right, so I just see, is the upgrade/update special pricing available for Groove Agent SE5, which is included with Cubase 11 Pro? I don't believe so, since, I think it's going to be for if you had the full version of Groove Agent 4 going to Groove Agent 5. So I don't believe that it's updatable from the SE version, since that was just part of the Cubase license. So. Okay, so it just says, hello, I have a question. I'm getting a lot of interest in Cubase, going to be my next purchase. I'm also an FL Studio user, and I was wondering if there's a way you can wire FL Studio into Cubase. So I think, Cubase 11 does rewire. It's probably a technology that may not last long because it was kind of drop support for Apple M1 chips. But I believe, you might be able to run even FL Studio as a plugin inside of Cubase. So I haven't used FL Studio. Someone gave me a copy when it was kind of more like a plugin. But you could do that. Okay, so we just see a question. I wonder if it's possible to add metadata to media files in Cubase Elements. So let's go ahead and open up Cubase Elements. Let me see if I have it on my... All right, so let's see if we go into Media Bay. All right, so I don't think it has kind of the tagging capabilities that you do with Cubase Pro, but let's see if we come over here, depending on what metadata that you want to add. So, with the full Cubase Pro, you could do all sorts of different things, but you could also insert, broadcast wave chunks. So if you wanted to put like your name and description and timestamp when files are exported, so you could do that. But if it's going to be like tagging samples for sample libraries, probably Cubase Pro would be a better solution. So Gareth is just saying, if you're breathing, please hit the like button. All right, so we just have a question about any news on Cubase 12 other than the new licensing. So the only thing that's been announced is the Apple M1 Silicon native support. So, but as soon as it's out, we will see more. We'll see more information. So I just see, what about Intel 12th generation and Windows 11 compatibility with Cubase? So, currently Cubase 11041 is Windows 11 compatible. I don't think there's anything special we have to do for the Intel 12th generation. So, so you shouldn't have any concerns with current versions or future versions. All right, so we have a question, is this fully compatible with the new Mac Pros yet? So it is fully compatible and it runs in Rosetta mode, but we'll see Cubase 12 when it's released will have full M1 native support. Okay, so we just see a question. Can I open 2 MIDI tracks in 2 windows? Okay, so let's say I wanted to edit my piano. All right, let me just... All right, so I think that there's a preference that you need to uncheck. So let's say if we go to editors, I think it may be set where it could be editor content follows event selection. So let's say, so make sure, I think that if you want to uncheck that, so let's say now at this point, I want to open up this in one edit window, and I wanted to look at this guitar part in another window. And you could obviously set up workspaces for this. So we could just see that you could have like the guitar part and the piano part. But again, just go to your preferences and make sure that you have editor channel follows event selection unchecked to do that. And one other thing that you could do is you can say, okay, I want to look at these 2 parts. So let's say if I get out of my notation view, sorry about that. And you could also just kind of look at 2 parts and switch back and forth. Say, okay, I want to see the grand, I want to see the bass, and we could choose to colorize by part so that we could see multiple parts within the same window. But yeah, if you do that, yeah, like we showed before, you could open them up 2 separate windows. All right, so we see Michael Teams has created a new hot mesh track, so looking forward to playing bass on it. Okay, reading through. So I just saw one comment. So it says new license for Cubase 11 or for all VST plugins. So So the new licensing system will be for Cubase 12 and all the plugins that come with Cubase 12. And over time, probably as the next versions of programs come out, it'll be utilizing the new license management system. Okay, reading through comments. All right. So it says, can you make a special for the multi-tap delay? I think this is so huge and then so much possibilities. I really wanted to go deep with the modulations and architecture. So there is, if you look, I think when Cubase 10.5 or 10 came, when it came out, there is like a 15-minute tutorial or so that I did on the multi-tap delay. So if you're looking for a tutorial, just kind of look for it. It's probably in the new walkthrough videos for the version. It might have been 10.5 when it came out, but there's a pretty extensive tutorial on it already available. Okay, so I just kind of keep seeing that the tick, and I think we covered this, the randomizer tick. So let me just make sure that, and I'm not sure if this was in the MIDI editor, but we did cover that, but let me just, all right, so I'll just look at this in the drum editor and all right, so, if it's with the, this tick, like in the safe range for ticks here, you can, so let me know which tick, if it's in the randomizer, if it's in the MIDI modifier section, just let me know. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see a question from Oren Bynum. Okay, he says, greeting. Last night I fell asleep working in Cubase. Now I can't get into my lower zone to continue editing my music. I may have hit something while asleep. Please help me get back. So if the lower zone is hidden and it's just not showing up, come over here to the upper right-hand corner. You'll see these icons right here, and this icon here will turn on and off the lower zone. So the one, which is this little group of 3 icons, just click right there, and then the lower zone will appear. So give that a try, Oren. Okay, so I just see from Jeff Sabelski says my system fingerprint file has changed or corrupted when I open new window in Cubase. Any suggestions? Programs work fine. I think I activated something for Windows 11 update and tend not to. So, try, Jeff, just to, if you reinstall the e-licenser, that will probably take care of it for you. Okay, so we have a question, might have been asked, but any way to preview samples in MediaBay via a channel with plugins using stereo out, trying to lock various vocal samples to a particular key without importing on the fly? So because when we're auditioning the samples here, so let's say, what it's going through is, it's not assigned to a particular track. So if I wanted to come here, now you may be able to come over, and this is going through the control room. So you might be able to just go to your control room inserts and say, okay, I want it while previewing, and you would probably turn this off, when you're playing back your track. But let's say, okay, I wanted to go through this particular plate reverb. So now when I audition, you could have, an effects chain. So, so maybe if you put it, but realize that this isn't, when we're previewing, it's not assigned to a track, so it can't really assume that it's going to take that, but it will get routed through the control room, and the control room can have its own presets. So now if I wanted to audition through,
I feel a new day in life. Remember me. Remember me. It's funny sometimes how they were your best friend now. So funny sometimes.
So, but realize that when you play back your track, all your tracks would then be routed through the particular reverb. So, but it's not going to preview through a particular channel because it's not assigned to a channel. It doesn't want to randomly assign plugins to you. Okay, just seeing discussion of different composers and education and Burt Bacharach. So. Okay, reading through more discussion. All right, so we see from JVI question, my sustain pedal is not working. I don't even see MIDI activity when I use it. Any ideas how to resolve this? So if it's not seeing MIDI data, like, if you don't see like the little MIDI activity light here, that would indicate that it's not transmitting through your MIDI controller. So most sustain pedals are going into a MIDI controller. So make sure that the connection that the sustain pedal is connected is expecting to see the sustain pedal, and it's not, like an expression pedal, and it's expecting to see continuous controllers as opposed to kind of an on-off state, or that it's plugged into like a headphone jack if you have a keyboard workstation as a controller. A lot of times when you look, you could see sometimes, depending on a controller, you may see if there's MIDI activity connected via controllers and what controllers are transmitting. But if it's not transmitting from the MIDI controller, there's probably not much we could do in Cubase to resolve it. But you could see if it's actually, transmitting or changing sounds, or, if there's any MIDI activity in the controller, from hitting the sustain pedal, and sometimes the switches just break. So, all right. So we have Saeed checking in from Oman. Thanks for joining. As Gareth said, it says might be a solder problem. They break easily, but they're also easy to fix. Okay, my chat field jumped on me. I think I'm zeroing in on where we were in the discussion. Also with the controller, Gareth says he finds the iRig keys needs reverse polarity. So some controllers are kind of automatically sensing the controller. There's kind of two different schools of thought. So there's a Roland and a Yamaha controllers that are completely opposite. So if you get a Yamaha controller in a Roland keyboard, it's not going to work, and vice versa. So some controllers are clever and have a switch. Like the pedals will have a switch as well. Okay, so we just have what was the trick to reverse polarity again? So usually, I think we could do it in the logical, in the input transformer. You could try this. So we'll come to the input transformer on a MIDI track and see if I have it as a preset. But you might be able to say transform, and we'll say type is equal to controller. I don't have a sustain pedal hooked up. I'll have to buy one. So we'll say controller 64, and I think we want to take value 1 and maybe choose to see if we come over here to value 2, and then maybe choose mirror. And that might do it. I could, if you want to email me, JVI, I could probably figure it out on when I have my personal computer on and have a controller to kind of switch it. But, make sure that your sustain pedal is physically working. See Gareth just mentioning, well done, Steinberg, for listening to users and getting rid of the 30-day idea. It was great news. Yeah, so we took a lot of feedback from these live streams and made sure that Steinberg was aware of the reaction and stuff like that. So I thought they did a great job kind of meeting customers' expectations. All right, so seeing kind of continued questions about Cubase 12, what will be in it. So again, I can't really comment on it until it's released. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so you see JVI's fixed his controller, his pedal, so that's good. Okay, we're still reading through comments, so thanks for all the great discussion. All right, so you just see a question from JVI. Cubase 11 Pro metronome reverted to default beeps. Try changing it back to MIDI. Metronome setup, click sounds, custom sounds. All other sounds are missing. Example, woodblock, how to fix this. So let me just make sure I'm looking at the right thing. So we come over here. So we get a click sounds. So it's not going to be under. Okay, so we say use the custom sounds. So check here. You will see click sound presets and see if they're just if they show up right there. So so if we just say use the Steinberg sound, so if we come over here, we could now have kind of the wood block. So as we would play. So, but just check here to make sure. So you could just, again, transport to metronome setup. And let me just. So, make sure that you have it's under click sound presets. So if you're looking here for sounds, it may just take you to look for different samples. But I think if you go to, we could probably find the samples. Let's take a look in like my preferences here. So depending on if you're on Mac or PC, you can go to the preferences. Okay, so we're here to Cubase. So you'll see under click sound presets that's where all the sounds are. So look to see if you have those. If not, probably just if you do a safe start, with Alt Control Shift or Command Option Shift, that should get you back where all those will be visible again. All right. So just see from Sean just saying automation is great, but to be able to save all the automation, apply it to another track, you can use a MIDI track and filter for CCs only. Map the same knobs or just a CC to the same automation on another track, and then the original MIDI output, and you get complete control over the automation via MIDI. All right. So just if you wanted to do that, for so I'm not sure what if you wanted to, maybe Sean, if you could say if you wanted to write the data, to 2 tracks using 1 CC, if that's what you want to do. So, all right, Gareth wants us to get the quadrifuzz out. We'll see if we can get it in some point in the live stream, Gareth, just for you. Right. And we're going to have a Boris Johnson style party, according to Gareth. All right, great to see Mark Rabin on the live stream. All right, so just see a question. How does crossover pricing work? So I'm not sure if it's a cross grade pricing. So, periodically they will do, and some programs will have cross grade prices where if you're a user of a different program that you could get a discount in cross grading to Nuendo, and we don't make you give up your license or anything like that. And sometimes they'll have different promotions for different products. I think we have lots of people that wanted to do cross grades to Dorco, so I think that's a constant skew. But you could, you could check, and so, but that's kind of how it works. Is we don't make you give up your license. We don't want your other software either. So. Okay, so I just see why the most icon is invisible in all Cubase versions. So there's there could be lots of different icons that are available and depending on your screen resolution. But if there's a particular icon that you can't find, but there's lots of icons throughout the program that are visible, as you could see on my screen. All right, so we had a question. Is it possible to color 5 tracks in a single click? Yes. So all you have to do, go to a different project here. Okay, so let's say I want to change all the tracks, all the color of all these tracks here. Go to I could just select the tracks and then go to my colors tool here and just change just like that. Or we could, just go to the colors tool and then you could select the active color. So whatever is selected, you could just kind of change just that easily. So we just see what is the subject of this live stream. So, we just kind of do Q&As. So that's kind of the intention of the live streams, is answering user questions that they have. So we just kind of sit here. So there's not generally a particular, focused subject. So it's just whatever questions that people have. See, JVI, his revelation of the day is the uncheck editor follows content or event selection to open up multiple MIDI windows. So I'm glad you learned a new trick. Okay, my chat field just jumped on me. All right, just finding my spot where I was. Let's see. Okay, so we have a question. How can I add pictures to media favorite section? I can see pictures from Steinberg sample packs, but not from my own. So if it's going to be like in the media library here, this is going to be tied to particular metadata. So when we come over here to loops and samples, where we see these icons, I think you need to be a Steinberg developer to be able to have the icons be generated, or like a Steinberg content partner. So there isn't a way to have these particular folders, icon for kind of your user created folders. You see Michael Teams has to check out for the day. Hope you have a great weekend, Michael. All right, so we have a question from Lewis. It says, I love my control room for quickly check mono, stereo regularly through the project. However, I've noticed consistently that my mono mix seems to be a couple of dB lower in volume. Is that normal? So it could be, and what could cause that might be, so let's say if I'm listening to this, so let's say if I go to my control room, so it could be your pan settings. So let's say if I wanted to come over here and I go to my down mix presets. So let's say if I go to my project setup, so let's say if I go to, let's see if this makes a difference, to -6 dB. So it could be like, tied into your pan law settings. So let's say I just wanted this to be, so try changing your pan law settings, and then that could have an impact of, of how, if the, how the signal is sounding, like if panning is taken away or added. I'll back up Nick Ruggles with the Dave the Songle hashtag. So. All right, so I just see, can you run the Embracer VST on Cubase 11 if you copy over the VST plugin.dll from Cubase 8.5? I think you might be able to. I don't think that there's anything that would specifically turn it off. It just may not be supported. But yeah, I think you would be able to. I don't have 8.5 on this computer to check, but I think that you would work as long as that version was like still installed and operable on your computer's operating system. All right, so we see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining. Hope you're well. Okay, so hi Greg, what is the best tool to use as a quick sequencer in Cubase or even a third-party recommendation software? So, I mean, I think that the sequencer in Cubase is fast, but if you want it more like a quick pattern-based thing, let me just come over here and I'll just think we could use one of the plugins, MIDI inserts for this. So let me just... Just all right, so let's say we have just kind of a simple bass patch. And we'll come over here to MIDI insert. Maybe even a step designer. So, if you come over here, so if you wanted to come over here, so if you just wanted stuff like that to and okay, I want this to be so you could, if you're looking for just like a really simple pattern-based sequencer, check out the Step Designer plugin. So you can get started with that if you want, if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, just to kind of inspire some creativity. Okay, reading through comments. So I just see, are there any sequencers built into canned virtual instruments? So a lot of them, like if I wanted to come here, let's say if I was just playing this, we could come over here to like the arpeggiator. So if I just wanted to come, and then you could also just kind of come over here, just different presets. So you can say, okay, I just wanted to. As I just hold a chord down. So there's lots of different instruments that will have, you know, pretty extensive arpeggiation capabilities as well. Okay. All right, so I just see a question about the lower zone MIDI parts. I want to quickly toggle between the score editor and key editor. I compose bass line while watching the chord track and need to sometimes change editors. All right, so let's say, all right, so let me just come to this project and we'll activate it. All right, sorry about that. So let's say if I want to come here, so, you know, you could just kind of click. All right, so let's say if I'm here, I could just go to the, you know, switch between the score editor and the key editor. And let's see if there's a way to like keyboard shortcut for that. So if you're in the lower zone, let's say if I switch my preference here, and I go to editors and I say open editor commands, opens editors in lower zone. So now if I just hit like Command or Control E, it's a lower zone, Command or Control R. I can just open that, but let's see if there's I'll look a little bit more here. Okay, so there's an open score editor in lower zone. And open key editor in lower zone. So you could have these assigned to different keyboard shortcuts, and you'll find this under the editors tab. So you could have a dedicated keyboard shortcut to toggle back and forth between whether you want to have the key editor or the score editor in the lower zone. So look under the editors tab. I'll just switch my preference back. Okay, so I just see you can change the icons, track pictures in the mixer, but it doesn't show up in the project view like it does in GarageBand, etc. So let's say it does, it just kind of shows up right here. So you may have to, let's go to your track control settings and let's see. So let's say we have an audio track. So if I want to add like an electric guitar track on this, I'll go to my mix console. All right, so let's say on this track, I want to add just make sure my track pictures are okay. So I'll come here. Let's assign these to guitars. So let's say, okay, this is be my acoustic guitar. Okay, so now when I come right over here, we go back to the project window. Let me just close this window here. Now we see our guitar parts and there's the track icons just laid out for us right there. So you can add them either place and they'll show up. Okay, so you see, can I add custom samples to the media bay, like with my own icon too? So, you can add any samples. Media bay will search for any samples. So as soon as you come over here and go to your file browser, you could add those and add it to a favorites folder. But when you go to the loops and icons, it's not going to show up directly here, but you could just, when you come over here, just say, okay, I want to go to my user presets, and then you could have all of your user presets or all of your favorites that could be accessed directly there. So it's not an icon, but you could quickly access it all the same way. Okay, so we have a question. What's the best way to save a group of plugin settings in a track as one? So the best way to do that would be just to save a track preset. So let's say I have, like a number of insert plugins here. So let's say I have a little delay action. I got, EQ. I have, compressor, whatever. And, as we're working with this, a tube, and I wanted to have this also go to my EQ settings here and my channel strips. So at this point, I could right click and we'll say save track preset, and we'll call this January 14th, 2022. So now if I wanted to come over here and let's say I got rid of all of these, I could come over here to my user presets, track presets, audio, and then we'll see our January 14th, 2022, and I could just drag and drop and everything will be recalled. So we come over here. So if I just kind of start off with, my loaded channel preset, and we had this set to none, nothing going on. So again, just once you right click, save channel preset, and then you could just drag it over like that, or just add track using track preset. So, so we could say load track preset here, add track using track preset. So that's a pretty easy way to work with it. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to save a mixdown file and have it open into Wavelab automatically? All right, so let's say if I want to do this, I could just say, let's export audio mixdown, and then we see an after export, and we can say open in Wavelab Pro 11. So now I'll just do a quick export. So we'll export the audio. So it's going to export it. And then we see Wavelab launches. So we don't have to have Wavelab open. Wavelab will launch and automatically have our song populated just like that. So that's all you have to do. So once again, to do that, just go to your file to export audio mixdown, and after export, just say open in Wavelab. Okay, so we just have a question. So it says, when I drag a MIDI clip's length, the MIDI notes seem to move towards the end of the clip as well. Is there a way to adjust a MIDI clip without altering the note's position within it? Okay, so let's say I have these MIDI events here. So if I adjust my length here, we see that the MIDI events haven't changed. So probably what is happening is your sizing mode is set to sizing applies time stretch or sizing moves content. So if I do sizing applies time stretch, I could time stretch that MIDI to fit the event. Or if I do sizing moves contents, the event contents will move, but just make sure that you are set to just normal sizing. And then as you do that, you could elongate or truncate the length of the event without affecting the position of notes. So just make sure that you're in normal sizing mode, and then you should be good. Okay, so I just see, can I change the format of notes or audio elements not using Very Audio? Okay, so we'll just show you here. We just revert. So let's say if maybe I wanted the singer to sound older or younger by, altering the formants of her voice. So I'll come over here. Let's just go ahead and... So there's a plugin called Pitch Shift or Pitch Correct. So I'll come over here, just do it as an insert. And under Pitch Shift, we'll see Pitch Correct. So if I wanted the singer to sound older, we could adjust the formants here. Or I want her to sound younger. So if you want to do a duet with someone 20 years later in their life, and now you want it to be older. I should have told you you were out of tune. Whatever you did, that was okay. Up until now, that was okay. Suddenly it's Beatles. So just use that. Something about that just sounds so wrong. So, and it's a great tool for a lot of different things. Okay, so we have a question, Cubase Revelation versus Reverence. How does Greg use these reverbs? So, the Reverence is a convolution-based reverb, and that's going to be for, and that's almost like using samples as the basis for the particular effect. So we come over here, we could see Reverence. So we would load up a particular impulse and we could listen to the impulse here. I'll just turn this up so we could hear it a little better. And I'll just turn this up. So what they've done is basically sample different acoustic environments, or in this case, a plate. So I tend personally, if I'm wanting something like very organic and acoustic sounding, if I'm trying to do orchestral work where, I'm trying to make it sound like it's in a concert hall, I would tend to navigate towards a convolution reverb. And if I want it, sometimes you can create reverb effects that can never physically exist in a room. And that's when I would maybe use Revelation when I'm looking for something that's not trying to simulate a particular acoustic environment, but I want reverb as an effect. That's when I would tend to use Revelation. So. All right, so we have Michael Pierce checking in. He's working late, but glad he could join us. Glad you could hit the like button. All right. All right, sorry, okay, just found my spot in the discussion. Sorry about that. All right. So we see, hi, Greg. Tips and tricks to remove the bleed from kick drum to bottom snare mic during mixing. Thanks. All right. All right. So let's go ahead and take a listen. I think this might have something we could use. Okay. Okay, so let's say I wanted to, here's our snare bottom track. Okay, so we could hear like the, so here we could hear kind of, so I'm just going to go to a gate. So often like a gate would do the trick, but one of the cool things, you know, so I could just kind of take that. So, but, you know, often you could set kind of, yeah, because sometimes you could actually set, you know, particular frequencies for the gate. But, you know, just using a gate often will, you know, negate, you know, the bleeding tracks. So let's say if I'm just here and I'll turn this up so we could hear it. So, and then if I turn the gate off, so, you know, at this point you could just, so, you know, try experimenting with the gate. Often, you know, another thing you could do if you really wanted to is just kind of select, you know, the event. If it was like really problematic, you could come over here also and do stuff like, okay, I want to get spectral layers on it and take out particular frequencies. We just, so if we come over here to our audio extensions and we can see our spectral layers. And not showing up today for some reason, but you could kind of do frequency dependent editing using spectral layers. But, you know, for the most time, you know, gates will be your friend there. All right, so we see from JVI, it's a follow-up on his missing metronome sounds. So he found a folder. No idea how to make Cubase load these files as intended. You know, I would try just to do a quick, you know, start your Cubase with in safe mode and, you know, see if the sounds show up. I think it would kind of reset it if your sounds are there. So it's probably a corrupt preferences. So you check that out, and you can do that by starting the program with Alt Control Shift or Command Option Shift held down, and just temporarily disable the program preferences and see if they're there. All right, so we just see question. Hey, Greg, what is the right way to open an instrument track and make sure it's playing in stereo and sounds in stereo after being rendered in place to WAV format? Can we undo the conversion process? All right, so let me just... So I think if you can undo the render in place. So let me just do a quick test of that. Okay, so we're doing okay on time. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. All right, so if I have like this audio here, and I have done a render in place on it. You know, so as soon as I come over here and I play, you know, you can undo it right after the fact, and that will take you right back to where you were. But, you know, usually, you know, I haven't had a problem where it's ever not done it in stereo for me unless I specifically routed to mono groups or something. Okay, so we have a question. So MIDI effect transformer. When should I use transformer? Thanks. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. So we'll come over here to the MIDI inserts. And we'll open up the transformer. Okay, so basically kind of what this is real-time kind of remapping of controllers. So let's say, you know, I had, you know, like my modulation wheel isn't working and I wanted to assign another knob. So we could think of this as a plug-in format of the input transformer. So let's say if I wanted to come over here and just say, okay, I wanted to transform and I wanted to take, you know, what was, we'll just say, a controller. So let's say I wanted to turn controller 11 into controller, you know, 1. So I need to come over here. I'll say type is equal to controller. And I wanted to say value 1 of the controller, we want to subtract 11. Or I want to automatically take notes. And I want to make sure that value 1 is transposed to, you know, E major scale. So from C major. So we could take this and take, you know, incoming MIDI data and transform it and, you know, have it do other things based on the incoming data. So again, just kind of like what we use the input transformer for, we could take this same principle and apply it to an actual part, an actual track or MIDI, you know, for processing MIDI events after they've been recorded. All right, so we have Kamal checking in from Vancouver. Thanks for joining. Okay, so we see how to reset the velocity of a MIDI kick to a fixed value. Okay, so let's... Okay, so let's say if I wanted to look at the velocity of all of these notes, and let's say they're all changing. So I think if I just come here and we see our velocity values, let me just try holding down Shift and type in 100. Oh, it's not going to do it. Try Control. All right, so I'm going to type in 100. I'll hold down Shift. Okay, it doesn't. So now I'll type in 100 and hit Control or Command, and then they'll all be fixed to the same velocity. So now if I come here and I say, let's go to 88, hold down Control Command, they'll all be 88. Or I want these to be 64, Control Command, and we can see that the velocity will just adjust accordingly. So whatever notes are selected, you could just go to the velocity in the info line, and then you could type in a fixed velocity value. All right, so I think I'm at the end of live questions. Let me go ahead and get to, we had some questions that were mailed in, so let me get to those. Thanks for all the great questions. And again, if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. Okay. Okay, so we just see, hey Greg, I must have accidentally clicked something because on Cubase 11, my event line is automatically selecting any event it hovers over. How do I turn that option off? So I think that this is going to be the auto select events under cursor. So let's say if I have, so if I have this going on, I could, so let's say I'm, you know, while as my cursor is playing over different events, so we'll go to our preferences, and then we could turn this on, and we'll say under editing, I believe, we'll see auto select events under cursor. So once this is turned on, as soon as the cursor is over an event on the selected track, and I'll turn off the cycle, it will automatically get selected. So if I have, like, you know, these events selected here, and I have this track selected at this point, while the cursor is over the event, this could automatically select the event. And this is also very handy for if you're working with control surfaces. You could just simply, you know, have this event selected for processing, just kind of doing with your control surface capability. So now as soon as the event is hover, you don't have to select with the mouse. It could automatically be selected. But if you don't want that to happen and it's like, why is this happening? Just come over here to your preferences, and we will choose under editing, auto select events under cursor. Okay, so we had another question that was mailed in, is how to do scale correction on live MIDI input. So let's say I wanted to, let's see, I think I have like a piano somewhere, say a Rhodes patch here. So just turn this up so we can hear it a little better. Okay, so while we're playing this, you know, we could set scales, you know, internally within an editor, but if I wanted to come here, I could just say, okay, let's grab it within my key editor. If I wanted to do this, we could go directly to, so within the editor, our scale assistant, and we could set our scale here to, let's say I wanted to be in a major. Okay, and then we have a snap live input. So as I would go to record notes, now, and I'll just choose to edit this. Let me just choose to record into the editor. And as I would run into different events, that all of my notes, let's say if I hit a bunch of C notes here, I'll record directly into the editor. So I hit an A minor chord. So now as we want to look at the particular events, that these would automatically be routed to the key of, so I played an A minor chord here, and it automatically snapped it to the scale because we have snap live input active within the editor part. Okay, and we had a question, and we kind of covered this a little bit in the previous live stream about the Wavelab comparator. This is from Soren in Sweden. So let me go ahead and show this. And he had two audio files, and he did processing on one, and he didn't really notice a change when he did the Wavelab comparator files. And he was kind enough to send the files over to me. So let me just go ahead and the one thing, and Soren was kind enough to include a video, but when I listened to the files here, so so he took one file here, just a little snippet, and then what he did is he had run kind of a low pass, like a high pass filter on it, so that you're kind of taking all of 300, anything below 320 hertz and filtering it out. So if it, so now we do this, that's what the effect of that EQ is doing to the file. And he had one as being, this was the file that was processed with this EQ, and this is the file from before. But to me, it seems like these files are the same sonically. So when I listened to it, and did a comparison between the two, there wasn't much difference, because I think it was the same file, that maybe when you rendered, that it wasn't actually, that is doing the same file between them. So I did a render. So I just went over here and clicked on render in Wavelab. And now that I rendered this with this EQ setting, at this point, this is what it sounds like with that particular frequency, that EQ applied to the file. So as I wanted to come over here, so let's say this was, so we had, these were Soren's files. So we had the first one, the second one, and now when I applied the filter on it, this is the sound of the everything below 320 filtered out. So we could hear kind of a sonic difference between those two. So no low end. In the previous one, we have low end here, like kind of the full frequencies. And when we listen to this, and we could even kind of see it in the spectrum analysis here. Okay, so now when I want to do like the Wavelab file comparator, and what I want to do is to go to the analysis tab here, and we'll say audio file comparator. So we'll say this was the file I processed and this was Soren's file, and I hit OK. It's now generated the Delta file, and this is the file that was the difference between the two. So it seems like maybe you saved a file, but maybe you didn't render the file with the plugin settings, and that's why when you compared the two files, that there was no difference, and why the Delta file, didn't seem to make much sense. So I think that's what you did, Soren, maybe by accident. So. All right, so we had another question sent in. Thanks again for sending questions in advance. So we'll just open up a new project to show this. And it's a question on Groove Agent full version. All right, so let's say if I have, so let's say I will come over here and I have one kit that's set up. So when we go to, let's say, our mixer, and when I go to the mixer here, we can, let's say I wanted the snare to have, more to go to output 2, and I want my kick to go out of output 3. All right, so now we look at their mixer. So I have snares, kicks, and when we go to a second agent, that's going to be running more like a percussion agent. And let's say I'll come over here, and now we can go to kind of a different agent here. So let's say, okay, I'll put 10, 11, 12. So the first question was, if I have just find some of the different. All right, so I can say, okay, let's come over here. We have this going to 19 and 20. All right, and let's say I had like an aux send here. And we'll come back here to our agents, and I'll select this agent. All right, so the first question was, now that if I come over here, I export mixer and effects to Cubase. Okay, so I'll just say, okay. All right, so now as we play, now we see our mixer settings for the, for Groove Agent, for the first agent have gone over. And if you wanted to undo that, so the question was how to undo that. So we could just hit the undo key. So I think we could do this to 1, but it doesn't seem like we could do to 2 different ones. So if I export the mixer settings there to that one, let's say that it's kind of grayed out once it's been done. So I see where it could make sense that we should be able to do this independently for each of the agents, but it seems like once you do it once, that it doesn't do it for the other agents as well. So I'll pass that along as feedback. All right, so let's jump back to our live discussion. Once again, thanks for all the great for all the great questions that people sent in. Let's see where we're at. Okay, so I think I'm at the end of questions there. We'll see how we're doing on time. If we wrap up a little early, that'd be okay. All right, so I think I'm at the end of the questions. Let's give it another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll see if there's other questions that come in. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for all the wonderful questions that people have sent in. All right. All right, so it looks like we got through all of the questions. So thanks very much. Once again, we will be doing the live stream again on Tuesday of next week, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We want everyone to have a wonderful weekend. Please stay safe and healthy. And you can always submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Everyone have a wonderful weekend, and thank you so much.